Welcome, and thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Ricardo Martinez, he, him, and I'm the Executive Director of GLBTQ Legal Advocates and Defenders, also known as GLAD Law. We are gathering tonight in community to share information, hope, and to hopefully encourage you to keep in touch and keep fighting alongside us. As many of you know, GLAD Law was founded in New England back in 1978, almost 50 years ago, by lawyers, law students, and other community members who dreamed of a better world, a world that recognized our common dignity and humanity, and one that included all LGBTQ plus people and that lifted all of our communities. We were founded by people who believed that the law in all of its forms was one important tool for making that dream a reality, and we still do. We don't know exactly what's coming, but we are here to let you know that we're going to do everything to keep on working and fighting for the recognition of LGBTQ people's dignity and humanity and for the safety of our communities no matter what. And we're here to talk about some of the ways that we can all work together going forward, because in moments like this, it's when we all need each other. We received many questions ahead of time, and we will get to some of them, hopefully most of them throughout this call, but we won't be able to answer every single one tonight. And we are unable to give legal advice on this call. So if you have a very specific question about a situation, we suggest that you contact a lawyer directly, or you can also reach out to our legal info line, GLAD Law Answers, for information and referrals. We are recording this call, and there will be we'll be sharing some additional information by email after this call. Before I turn this call over, I want to be very crystal clear that this is an all hands on deck emergency moment. There's no way around that reality. And I want to be just as clear that we and our legal partners are already and have been engaged on many of these types of issues that are hot button issues for this upcoming administration. We will want to talk to you about resources at some point, because we will need them to do this work at the level and with the persistence that is required. All the same, we want you to know some important information. I'm grateful to have met several of GLAD Law's attorneys, people who have been fighting for LGBTQ people in the courts, legislatures, and elsewhere for years. Mary Bonato, the Senior Director of Civil Rights and Legal Strategies at GLAD Law, Jennifer Levi, Senior Director of Transgender and Queer Rights, Polly Crozier, Director of Family Advocacy, and one of our newest attorneys, Sarah Austin. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise, your light, and all this critical information with folks who are on the call tonight. And just a shout out to all the other GLAD Law staff, board, former and present, who have contributed so much to that legacy as well, and to everyone who is here and defiantly continues to show up authentically every single day of your life. Keep doing that. You enrich my life in so many ways, and I cannot wait to meet y'all. To just get us going, Jennifer, I want to start with you. What are we expecting from an incoming Trump administration, and what should people know about how we and others are preparing?
Ricardo, thank you for the question. And, I want to echo your thanks for everyone joining this call. And yeah, this is a really important moment. And I suppose the good news on this front is that the incoming administration has been candid about its plans throughout the campaign, but also through its prior time in federal government. There's a lot that we know. And one of the things that we know is that in the immediate crosshairs of what we can anticipate will be undocumented people and transgender people. And we certainly saw that focus on those communities in the last weeks before the election. So GLAD Law is prepared, not surprised, and the situation is serious. And we are ready. We have a lot to go on in preparing, including, of course, Project 2025, the platform of the RNC, and Trump's own statements during the campaign. the first administration and experience with the military ban lets us know that this guy is going to do what he says. We should expect it. We learned a lot the first time through, and we have also learned a lot, quite candidly, through the efforts of anti-LGBTQ legal groups over the last 4 years. So I can share some of the ways about we're thinking and what we're preparing for. I will say we're not putting out our playbook, but let's start with timing, right? We need to think about key periods of time in terms of the kinds of changes that we can anticipate and the kinds of proposals that we expect. So there's the next 2 months, right? The administration doesn't change until later on in January. And we are doing work right now to prepare and to leverage some important policies to lay groundwork to preserve advances that we have been able to make over the last 4 years. It's one period of time. And then, of course, there's day one, where we can expect, because again, the incoming president has said that there will be executive orders that direct federal agencies to act. And here's where we have a lot to go on to be able to anticipate what's coming. And then if you look out further in timeframes, there will be time necessary for agencies to act in compliance with executive orders that will be issued on day one. There will be anticipated changes of rules in agencies, and of course, there is a party that controls both houses in Congress. And I think it's worth a step back for a moment, and I appreciate everyone's patience with this, but for a civics refresher, which is Congress makes the laws, courts interpret them, and the executive branch enforces those laws. So there remain very important built-in limits to what can be done through executive action alone. Setting aside for a moment what that means in terms of potential changes in law. So the incoming president has prescribed powers, not universal ones, and the executive can't override federal laws without Congress. And existing precedent establishes that there are some areas, and this is really important, of state sovereignty into which the federal government can't intrude. And also, changing federal regulations does take time. And then as a backstop, there, of course, are and will still be federal courts and state courts. And I know Mary's going to talk about some of the state-focused work. I think we all will. And those remain as bulwarks for democracy preservation. And of course, state and federal constitutions, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on. It's really an area where GLAD law has been on the front edge in the work that we have done. So none of this means that we won't see attempts to roll back the advances we've made. We will see those, but it does mean that we have pretty extensive tools to draw from in fighting back. The first administration, as I said, really sees Invest for preparedness, and just to remind folks that it was GLAD law and the National Center for Lesbian Rights in 2017 that acted very swiftly to challenge the announced transgender military ban in that summer. And it was that swift action that really enabled us to move before anything was finalized, and that we were able to really effectively keep some of the worst and most damaging proposed changes from going into effect before they started. Of course, other organizations joined in, and that was really important. And we've got strong connections across these teams. We learned a lot from that experience. And I will just say, having a deeper legal bench at GLAD law is really essential at this time. And I know you'll hear from Sarah Austin later in the program, but it means a tremendous amount to have the bench that we have at the moment to do this work. So at GLAD law, our strategy will be focused on stop, delay, and harm reduction. That in terms of stopping things, we're going to work to preserve federal law advances, use legal and administrative tools to delay harmful policies when possible, because we also need to be moving along political transformation, public education, and conversations at the same time that we can tie some really important and harmful things from going forward. And of course, we're going to have to develop ways to reduce harm through community preparedness and state level protections where possible, because I will say that there will be shifts and changes. We've already seen that in the efforts, particularly among southern and western states and elsewhere, of course, to roll back protections that have had really serious negative impacts on people's lives. So let me turn from that preparation to being more specific about what this will mean for GLAD Law in practice, we will be focusing heavily on some key areas in which we have deep expertise, and you'll hear about a number of these this evening. Of course, focusing on protecting our families, marriage equality, parent-child relationships are key pieces of this work. And we will be focused deeply and heavily on ensuring continued access to essential healthcare for transgender individuals of all ages, including adolescents and adults. And we have a lot of experience in the recent cases that we've worked on to draw from in doing that. And of course, we need to ensure protections for young people in schools and focusing on ensuring the robustness of non-discrimination protections where we can. This is not a complete list of the work, but these are areas where GLAD Law has really deep expertise and where we have really framed out in very significant ways our capacity, our connections, and our relationships with allied and community organizations to be able to do this work. Of course, we will have to, and we will be continuing to do the work that we are engaged with, including within New England and throughout the country. We are working at the moment in challenging the New Hampshire sports ban there. That work will continue. Our challenges to state healthcare bans in southern and western states, of course, will continue. And folks are focused, I hope, on an upcoming Supreme Court argument in which there is a case going up arguing against arguing that the transgender adolescent ban in Tennessee is unconstitutional, and all eyes will be really on that decision moving forward to strengthen the ways in which we will also challenge some of the federal restrictions that we can anticipate. So that's just a slice of what we're doing, and I know we have a lot more details to cover, so I'll turn it back to you at the moment, Ricardo.
That is indeed a lot, Jennifer. Thank you very, very much. Now I want to turn it over to Mary with two questions. First, I know that marriage is something we've received a lot of questions about. So what would you say to people about being worried or how worried they should be about Obergefell?
Thank you, Ricardo, and thank you, Jennifer. Well, I'm a worrier. Having said that, I think it's important to have a little perspective, and I want to provide some perspective about that. But before I do, I want to say that I agree with Jennifer. We're ready. We know what's coming. It is going to be bigger and badder than last time, in our estimation, based on what we've been reading and seeing. But, you know, some of us have been here a very long time, and GLAD has been here even longer. And it's always been our commitment that we are going to have your backs, and that we're really responsible for making sure the Constitution and its promises stay alive for LGBTQ people, and that they make a difference in your life. And that's not going to change. So we're ready, and we will continue to ready and re-ready ourselves for whatever is going to come at us. The other thing about GLAD is we have never given up or given in. And we believe there is always a path forward, even if it's not as bold and dramatic and quick and sweeping as we want, but that we will always fight forward. So there's that. And I want to say that when I think about this, you know, what we're facing, that, you know, Jennifer wants to deflect and delay and basically prevent harm and do everything we can to throw sand in the wheels. I'm all for that. And I think it's a good strategy. But I also want to say that we're going to respond, but we're also going to reach. We're going to be on offense because we're going to reclaim, and we need to aim to reclaim that sense of belonging in our society and in our institutions for LGBTQ people and in our constitutional commitments. So I just want to put that out there, that we never take our eyes off of that. Okay, so now marriage. Thank you. On marriage, so President-elect Trump has said very little about marriage on the campaign trail. I will say that, you know, on Election Day, November 5, you probably already know that there are 3 states that removed from their state constitutions amendments that had been passed in the bad old days when people were panicked about this issue. And those are Hawaii, California, and Colorado, and congratulations to them. But I want to just say that there's some other state amendments that passed. There were 7 states that approved of abortion coverage and some in states that didn't really have it. And in addition to that, we have states that approved of, and are you going to say, why is she talking about this? Paid sick leave for workers, 3 states. And those states were Missouri, Alaska, and Nebraska. And I am mentioning this because I think one thing that's been a real deficit in this campaign is that it seems like people don't care about each other anymore. But these kinds of policies passing suggest to me, at least, that we can be a little more hopeful that people are going to tune into each other's experiences in a way that they haven't of late. Now, on these marriage amendments, I want to say they were passed after states already had gone through a phase of over 40 of them passing anti-marriage legislation. And then that wasn't good enough. And there was so many people had ridden to political power on these issues that it was like, well, what else can we do? And especially after Massachusetts, we have this great excuse to say we need a constitutional amendment or this is going to happen all over the country. Not really, but in any event, so states started passing constitutional amendments, and we are seeing that same kind of ramping up around the rhetoric and the fear now, as part of why we're seeing such extreme proposals at the federal and state levels, is because of that fear and because honestly, it is a way for people to stay in or gain political power. Okay. Having said all of that, it's important, I think, that you know that the threat is real. And the threat is real because even if it's not in the Project 2025 playbook, which is, again, they're not telling us everything anyway, right? There are lots of movement actors, anti-LGBTQ, anti-repro, movement actors who are much larger than all of us and who have their own agendas. And they do not abide marriage at all. And in fact, I want to say that there's a case in a lower federal court where a party asked the court to reverse Obergefell. And of course, the court doesn't have the power to do that because only the Supreme Court can do that. Obergefell is binding law nationwide. But I think we may see some of this. We may see more litigation along these lines. Having said all of that, there's no reason in the world that the Supreme Court should even consider granting review in such a case. Marriage is something that settles people's status as a family. It supports the couple, their kids, allows them to, be there for each other in all walks of life, in other institutions, their jobs, like, who the spouse is, you get healthcare, this is your kid. Like, it just makes such a difference in people's lives. This is popular. It's been seamless and to integrate into American society. It's, even the Respect for Marriage Act, which passed in 2022, is a sign that the Congress and like over 60 senators were ready to turn the page and say, if you are married, your marriage should be respected at the state and federal levels. So I just want to say that, just because we're right and just because so many people agree with us doesn't mean that a minority out there can't continue to try to make trouble. But what I am trying to say is that Obergefell was correctly decided. It's, equal protection principles. How can you have this massive institution and exclude these people? It's marriage precedents that have long existed. So we have, lots to work with here. And again, it's just really works. It's good for families. It's good for kids. It's been a simple and seamless system. So I want to just say that I'd like to think that if anybody ever tried to bring it to the court, that they wouldn't get the votes they needed to even consider it. But if they did, then we are all on it. So I want to turn to just state level protections for a minute here, although I know Jennifer's mentioned some. I know Polly will mention some others. But I want to just say, GLAAD does a lot of things. We do litigation. We actually do a lot of state policy work, not only in New England. Yes, Polly. We do state policy work, and always we accompany our efforts with public education, with trying to make sure people understand, here's a problem we're trying to solve. Here's how that problem really contravenes the values that we share, so the people get it and why it matters. and why we're right, really, and we can talk about, like, we learn a lot from talking to people and listening to them about what their concerns and objections are. And often we can answer them or figure out a way to answer them. And that's so important in social change work. So having said all of that, our litigation team, you know, you, I don't know if you know, but like our litigation team has really built out access to healthcare for years now, on the HIV front, and, definitely with Jennifer leading, on the transgender front. And obviously that's going to be a priority. I also want to say we've always had to deal with pushback on non-discrimination laws around people who object for religious or traditionalist reasons. And, we have figured out a balance on those things in the country, and we don't want that balance to get askew. I do think we have some concerns about whether or not the federal government would return to something it did before of giving grantees federal money, public money to do public work, the freedom to pick and choose who they're going to serve and turn people away. We can't abide that because often these are really critical services that are, shelter, care, refugees. Like, these are things that really need to be open to everybody. And, so I want to say we're going to push back on that. Jennifer's mentioned students in a number of areas where we're very deep, and that is certainly true. I also want to just say something on the hopeful side around the fact that we had to do this before is that we made a lot of friends. We met a lot of people. We have a lot of allies. And we don't only have allies, we have partners. And I think that's really important in thinking about this work going forward. And we're not the only people who've been through this. The states have been through this. The blue states have been through this. And some of you may have seen that the blue state governors, if I can just use that framework for a moment, the blue state governors have their own organization now. They're going to join forces, and they're going to push back about things that are harmful to their residents. And there's an awful lot in Project 2025 that would be harmful to residents of states everywhere, including in the blue states who would be pushing back. So I'm very heartened by that. I'm also very heartened by the fact that the attorney generals in blue states were a huge part of the resistance in the first administration and have again learned lessons and again are going to be there for us. And we all live in states. Be in touch with your AG. Be in touch with your governor. And likewise, I just want to mention secretaries of state who are the guardians of the vote. Not the only ones, there's also courts, et cetera, but they are guardians of the vote. And, having those officers each be in a Democrat in a state is really, really powerful. Each of them can bring litigation. Each of them have particular responsibilities to their populace. And so, it turns out that we are in pretty good shape in terms of having that kind of force in terms of the numbers of states with that combination. The other thing I wanted to say is that, actually, just to be precise, 20 states have that Democratic governor, attorney general, and secretary of state. 5 are mixed, and 25 states are Republican controlled. So it's not quite an even fight, but it's pretty close. And people, one determined official can make an incredible difference. And moving forward, if you think about the legislative branch, which we haven't talked about a whole lot, in that instance, we're talking about 15 states that have both the House and Senate in Democratic control, 12 that are mixed, and that's 27 total, where it means things are really in play. And I've learned from our new executive director, Ricardo, about how a state that seems like, oh my gosh, how do people bear this? In Texas, shutting down so many anti-LGBTQ proposals, among others, and how important that is. And it's because people come forward. And if there's any message we can give you, it's please join in some way and participate. People need to hear from you, and showing up, as much as you can, but even once, can really make the difference. So I think I want to say in the end here that we've made a lot of progress, but we have a lot more to make. And really, we're all in, but boy, are we in for a ride here, all of us. So we would just appreciate hearing from you, and we're going to try to turn out, based on the questions today, the questions we know people have in the community, to try to get information out to all of you so that you can take care of yourselves and each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And shout out to Texans who may be on the call as well for continuing to show up in sometimes um, dire circumstances. I think what most impresses me about our community is just the amazing amount of courage that folks can muster up, especially in community. So appreciate anyone and everyone who has tapped in, tapped out, tapped back in again. Um, in the spirit of that statement, I do want to turn um, to the people, right? We know that many of the folks who have joined have very specific personal concerns. Glad Law will continue to develop resources, as Mary spoke about, to answer the questions that we have, that you have. Tonight, we can share general information in a few key areas. But Jennifer, can you start by addressing some of the questions we've heard from transgender people and family members?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. As you said, Ricardo, I can't give individual legal advice today on a webinar. That would be irresponsible, but I can offer some general guidance in two areas in which we, of course, are receiving a very significant number of inquiries, and that's around what should people do with regard to identity documents and how can people prepare for the likelihood of some more restrictive access to transgender-related healthcare. So I wanted to start by talking about identity documents. And I will say, if you've been thinking about getting your personal documents updated, and the only reason you haven't done it is either because you haven't prioritized it or it's complicated and you've wanted to put it out, now's the right time to move forward in most cases, I will say. And GLAAD has a significant amount of resources on our website that I would encourage you. One of the things we did, I mean, we launched an ID project that on November 9th, 2016, and we have helped thousands of people change their documents in collaboration with Ropes and Gray and Goodwin, and Shipman and Goodwin in Connecticut. But one of the things that we've had to do is, and I think it's been really helpful, is create pretty extensive self-help guides. I know it can be difficult to get through the legal process that it takes to update your ID documents, but we have self-help guides for the New England states, and there's a lot of other resources available through other projects, Massachusetts Transgender Political Coalition and others. There's some clinics that have been available, and we're going to do everything that we can to help people get the resources that they need to do so. But I also want to say, and I think that just to acknowledge, I mean, the tenor and the tone, understandably, of some of the questions that we are getting are coming from a place of fear and panic, which I absolutely understand. But it's really important for people to be thoughtful about changing their documents. The most likely changes that we can anticipate in federal policy relate to passports and Social Security markers. Birth certificates are based on state-based rules, and those shouldn't change. I mean, we have certainly seen hostile acts in states to change birth certificate policies, and that may be ongoing as well. But understanding that there are differences between federal documents and state documents, which I know people know. But I also want to say, transgender people have long had to figure out which IDs to change and how, and many people have been unable to do so in many places for a significant period of time. And it's important to be able to both think about what you need and anticipate some of the challenges, again, that are really highly individualized, either in having inconsistent documents or in some cases in having documents which create a record of having changed a birth record, which is true in some states and not true in others. So people really have to evaluate for themselves. Ask yourself, when am I asked for a particular identity document that I'm seeking to change, and how do I need to use it? It's not the same for everyone. One of the questions I often ask when someone asks me about getting their documents changed is, what do you need, and when do you expect that you would need to provide it for something? There are some documents that are used more frequently than others. I mean, Social Security ID markers are an example that many people don't necessarily use. It can come up in employment and can be an important document to change. So think through questions like, what are the documents that you've already changed? How might having inconsistent documents affect you? What documents do you actually use in your daily life, and what do you need? And I want to say there are, of course, a number of questions from parents, understandably, who are who are concerned, want to rush to change documents. I think it really is important to think about what I was saying at the outset, which is there will be, I don't doubt that we will see changes, and it's important to look out, but I think there's going to be some windows of time. And so involve your older children in decisions about what's important to them. And I'll just say, I don't think it's realistic for young people to expect to be stealth forever. And I honestly haven't thought that for a while, but you have to take into account someone's individual needs and circumstances in making those decisions. The other set of questions, of course, that we have gotten pertain to what can people expect and how can they prepare for the possibility of curtailed access to transgender healthcare because of federal changes, particularly those that pertain to what the incoming president has said would relate to federal funding for programs and institutions that provide transgender access to healthcare. And of course, people that receive healthcare through federal Medicare and Medicaid programs. And again, we've got a lot of tools in our arsenal to keep those changes from going into immediate effect. And we have learned a lot of lessons also from the attacks on reproductive health care about strategies to preserve care. This is where, picking on what Mary said, we will absolutely have blue states that will work with us in rolling out and developing programs to continue to provide healthcare where that is possible. But I want to say, I think there are things that people should be doing right now, and there are some immediate kind of short-term and long-term planning that people can do. I would encourage people to gather their medical records, have documentation letters from current providers, review your current medication supplies, be familiar with your insurance coverage details, schedule important pending appointments. Don't put those off if you have the opportunity to do that, and stay abreast of your state-specific protections or restrictions on transgender healthcare, understanding we have people with us from across the country. In terms of some of the short-term planning, think about building a buffer supply of critical medications if it's possible, and if you can do so within legal parameters, of course. It can be helpful to establish care with backup providers. Think about starting a healthcare savings fund if it's available, and of course, reach out to LGBTQ groups to develop the support that people will need going forward. And in terms of more long-term thinking, think about exploring a provider network in different areas. Consider and explore options in states with strong protections, including SHIELD laws, which we have in almost all of the New England states, which will be an important way to ensure ongoing care for many people. I want to say that I don't think we can sugarcoat it. I think that there will be a retraction of care. There's already been a retraction of care over the last 4 years, and some of that will become more formalized. And as I said, we'll get blue states to work with us. We'll stave off the changes when we can, but we've got to absolutely work at harm reduction. And well, let me stop there. And if I have time, I want to sort of circle back about the additional work that I think we really need to do to turn down the temperature in the community, not in the community, across the country, following this election, and really create the possibility of meeting people where they're at, deflecting and reversing the gross and egregious misunderstandings and stereotypes that have been thrown around about the community, and also create space to have conversations that I think will move us to a place of being able to develop more rational policies over time. And my hope and my goal is that as people see the baselessness of the retraction of care, that it will give us an opportunity over time to build back up to a place of more robust access and greater understanding. And Ricardo, I'll turn it back to you.
Whew. That is a lot of information, right? Thank you for tackling so many of those questions in such a short period of time. Jennifer, Polly, I am turning to you next. The other area where we have received so many questions and heard concerns around is family protection, particularly parent-child relationships, which I know you're an expert of. You have done significant work in this area. Can you talk to us a little bit about the lay of the land for these protections and what people can do if they're concerned about their families.
Absolutely. Well, first, I just want to say it's really good to be here in community together with my colleagues and with all of you listeners. We have heard from a lot of people really understandably worried about securing their parent-child relationships. I want to share, though, I think there's some really good news. I want to talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing, which is work that we will continue to do, and then also share a little bit about practical steps that you can take right now. So, Mary, Jennifer, we've all talked here. GLADlaw has been doing this work for over almost 50 years. Work to protect our most precious relationships, particularly parent-child relationships, we've been doing since day one. And we really have a deep bench and deep expertise in this work and a deep commitment to it. So we're going to be here for you in this issue for the long haul. And I would say since 2016, we've really been focused on kind of changing and updating the systems that protect every child in states across the country. And what I mean by that is updating really basic state level protections for children. We've been doing that work with really tremendous success. And our vision has been simple. It's been every child, state law should protect every child in their relationship to their parent, no matter how they're born, whether through assisted reproduction or surrogacy, no matter the marital status of their parent, the gender of their parents, the gender identity of their parents. It's really a vision of children are precious. Their well-being is part of is so incredibly important to us as a nation and a world. And we're all in it together to make sure their life is okay. And that has been a really strong message that has enabled us to make a lot of progress. So not only have we made a lot of progress, and I'll share what those states, but we've also done it in a way that's incredibly collaborative, which is one of the things I love about my work at GLADlaw, is that we really lock arms with community, with other institutions, with people we don't necessarily agree with or understand. But we find that common ground and we make progress. And in the process, we have built really deep relationships with so many in the states that we have done this work on, and worked hard to also not only pass protections, but implement them so that they work for people, so the forms are updated, so that people can actually protect their children. Because again, parentage is so core to well-being and children's ability to access rights and protections. So I just want to share, since 2016, GLADlaw has worked in collaboration to pass comprehensive parentage protections and also to make adoption access simpler in many states, in Maine, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Vermont, Michigan, Minnesota, and we're working and supporting ongoing work in other states right now. I think we're really trusted collaborators because, again, the focus is children. The focus is building protections and consistency for everybody. And I wanted to say, we talk a lot about states, right? Because that parent-child relationship is determined by state law. And so when we have protections in states, we are stronger. And we're going to continue to work in individual states to make sure all children are protected. So let me just take a minute to talk about, how you can use those protections right now, right? And I just want to leave you, if you leave with no other message from me other than this one, is do something. And in most states, you can do something. And what that means is 2 names appearing on a child's birth certificate because of a marital presumption. A marital presumption of parentage, so important, that automatic protection, you're on that child's birth certificate from day one. But as we know, the marital presumption, that birth certificate is evidence of parentage, but we want you to have more. We want you to have a judgment or a judgment equivalent. Because under the Constitution, this principle of full faith and credit, when you have a judgment or a judgment equivalent, you can go throughout the states, you can travel from your protective states to other states, and that judgment needs to be recognized. So it's a good time to take advantage of the protections that might exist in your state. right? And I'll just share briefly what those three might be. 12 states now have expanded access to what we call voluntary acknowledgements of parentage, which is a form you can sign in the hospital right when your child is born, voluntarily, without expense, without a lawyer, to have kind of immediate parentage access. You can also, in many states, seek a judgment of parentage under assisted reproductive technology laws. Those judgments are, I think, gold standard and also can be done relatively quickly, which is great. And then also, of course, there is co-parent and in some states, confirmatory adoption. So tools exist. We've always said, you know, given guidance to take advantage of these tools. And we're kind of just, when you're feeling worried in this moment, now's the time to take action and take advantage of those tools. Some particularly have no cost whatsoever, voluntary acknowledgements of parentage. Some people might sign a voluntary acknowledgement and also seek a separate judgment under the assisted reproductive technology laws or under the adoption code. That's okay too. It's a time for belts and suspenders. It's also a good time to take stock of your estate plan. Again, those are laws that happen in your individual state. States under state law, you know, a will to transmit your property on your death, or to put in guardianship provisions for your children, a power of attorney to say what you want to have happen if you're incapacitated, a healthcare proxy to say who can make decisions for you if you're incapacitated. You actually have a lot of power to say, here's who I want deciding these decisions for me. Here's what I want to have happen to my property, rather than the government. So I just want to say, I think in the area of parentage and kind of those family relationships, there are things you can do. We're here to provide you with information and support. I know that Sarah's going to talk a little bit about the resources we have developed. We've developed a lot, and we're going to keep developing them so you have the best information possible. And we're going to really continue to fight hard and collaborate to push throughout the country to make sure that families are protected, and to make sure that we're on top of any curveballs that might come our way. All right, back to you, Ricardo.
Thanks, Polly. As you were talking, I went to Google and I typed up judgment decree of parentage or its equivalent, just to make sure that I was well aware of what that meant. So thank you very much for
Well, yeah,
folks who
that's a
have-
great point. I'm sorry to be lawyer. It means something that came from a court. You know what I mean?
Yes, thank you very much. Sarah, we've talked a lot about resources, and I know we are now turning to you to tell us a little bit about what resources GLAD Law has available for people, and if you have any additional suggestions on how people can feel better in this quite difficult time, by all means, please share your wisdom.
Thank you, Ricardo, and thanks everyone for being here and having me. I would just tell you all, like, Erin is in the chat dropping tons of resources. Follow those links, bookmark them. There's a set of resources for New England parents. There's Know Your Rights documents. There's voluntary acknowledgement of parentage, like explainers. There's adoption resources. We have how-to guides for updating your ID documents in multiple states, and those are pretty detailed. And then we also have the ID project, as Jennifer mentioned. You can contact them if you have specific questions about your case, your circumstances, or, you know, particularly complicated circumstances, might be able to get connected with an attorney through that. And then we also have GLAD Law Answers, which is our legal information intake line. It's a great way to get connected to a lawyer who can help you with your specific questions, either within GLAD Law or outside of GLAD Law. So, you know, and if you just go to GLAD Law's website, like, we have a treasure trove of Know Your Rights documents. Like, I was clicking around on there today and finding stuff that even I didn't know about. So I definitely recommend just going, learning about your rights, learning about policy developments, learning about our work. It's just an incredible, incredible resource. So those are kind of my first line recommendations of what you can do to educate yourself and also take steps to protect yourself in the next couple months. And, you know, Jennifer and Polly talked a lot about steps you can take to protect yourself.
But my biggest piece of advice about what you can do to feel better beyond that, you know, immediate need of taking care of yourself and your family is to get involved, join the movement, be part of the fight. Every single person on this call is here because you care, and every single one of you has a voice. Every one of you has a story. Every one of you has gifts and talents that you can contribute to the movement that nobody else can. So think about what those gifts and talents are. Think, what am I really great at? What do I really enjoy doing? I can guarantee you there's a way to channel that into movement work and fighting for our rights and our equality, and our family and our community. So I'm going to go through like a couple options that you might consider. And if you have more creative ideas, like go for it. I'm all about it. But the most important thing is that we're standing up to this administration. We're sending the message that we're never going to back down. We're always going to stand up for ourselves and our rights. We're going to fight for equality. And honestly, we're going to win. And maybe we don't win in the short term, maybe it's the long term, but like it is inevitable. We are going to win as long as we stick together. So, things to do. Something you can do like literally today after this or tomorrow if it's weird to be on the phone at night. Call your senators, push them to confirm Biden's nominees for federal judges. There's a bunch of nominees out there that are just pending confirmation. We need as many fair judges in the federal courts as we can get going into the next 4 years. So that's like immediate action item number one. Things to do moving forward. Keep educating yourself. I mentioned all the resources on GLAAD Law's website. Read reporting by LGBTQ+ journalists. There's tons out there. Follow pro-equality organizations on social media, including us. And then if you're like really like, what is Project 2025? Like, what do I need to be worried about? What do I need to be ready to fight back against? Tons of organizations have released really detailed breakdowns of the specific threats facing our community from Project 2025. So you don't have to read the whole 900-page document, which I really don't recommend. It's like not a good time. You can get involved with your state and local equality groups to stay informed on legal developments as they're happening, and learn more about like what does it mean to fight back against this harmful law or fight for really positive protections that, you know, Polly and Mary and Jennifer all mentioned, state law efforts that would actually make our lives better in some states. So don't just get involved when it's scary, okay? Like there's good stuff we can be doing now, even in states where it's, you know, not as immediately threatening. Speaking of which, lobby your elected officials at the state level. You can do this so many ways now. You can text, you can write letters, old-fashioned way. You can do phone banking. You can give testimony publicly at a legislative hearing. It's so important that our legislatures understand our lives, our stories, our families, our lived experiences. And it's so easy to do it. There's tons of ways. There's honestly no excuse. Sorry, no excuse for not doing it. We've also seen, you know, in the last 4 years and probably longer, and I think we can expect it's only gonna increase, lots of attention on local school board meetings, lots of harmful policies getting passed through local school boards that target LGBTQ youth and especially trans youth. Show up to those meetings if you're in the school community. Speak out about how those policies would be harmful to kids and harmful to the school climate. Harmful for all kids, really, because it really affects the positivity and the culture of the school environment. Speak up in your daily life, in your workplaces, in your faith communities, in your school communities, in favor of equality and against harmful, dangerous disinformation, if you feel safe doing it. Speak up whenever you can and use the right names and pronouns for trans and non-binary people. Those are your friends, those are your coworkers, those are your family members. Help other people do that. And I think like we've kind of touched on this many times today, like changing hearts and minds is the work. It's what we do. Storytelling is so key. And so tell your story. Tell your story, tell your stories, tell your family stories, tell the stories of your neighbors and coworkers and friends who are LGBTQ+. Help them do that in a way that feels safe. It is the most powerful advocacy tool that we have, and it's so effective. And we really need to build up public understanding and break through this polarizing political rhetoric that wants to demonize us and wants to make people afraid of us. We can't turn away from those conversations. There are people out there who haven't yet learned that we are not a threat. We need to reach those people when we feel able to do it. And you don't have to do it every day. You don't have to do it all the time. There's a lot of people on this call. If we all commit to doing this even once, I think it would make a huge difference. Okay, we're running out of time, so I'm going to rapid fire. Most obvious thing in the world, like there's going to be protests, there's going to be direct actions, there's going to be calls to join those. And every single person who shows up matters. When you put your body on the street and you show this is what I care about, that is so powerful. But if you don't feel like that's an option for you, it's not safe for you, it's not healthy for you, you just hate it. There are lots of people who just can't stand it. There's other ways to support protests and direct action. You can help with planning and coordinating. You can take a training to be a legal observer to help keep protesters safe. You don't have to be a lawyer to be a legal observer. And you can also just like deliver food and water and first aid supplies if you kind of want to stay on the edges but still support. Similarly, you can participate in mutual aid networks. Those are organizations. A lot of them are really like spontaneous and informally organized, but some of them are, you know, have official websites and stuff. And if you just Google like trans mutual aid networks, there's tons out there. That's getting resources to people who are LGBTQ+ and who have HIV to get their basic needs met. This is a way to reach some of the most vulnerable members of our community. And if you're like in a deep, deep blue state and you're like, how do I help people who are more vulnerable than the people around me? Mutual aid is a great way to do that. It helps people get food, housing, necessary healthcare. Sometimes it helps people move to a safer area, things like that. So Google is your friend, and donate to GLAAD and donate to other pro-equality organizations, and also to pro-democracy organizations and pro-immigrant organizations and, you know, pro-DEI and pro-inclusion organizations. Like there is so much coming in the next 4 years and we need to be ready for all of it. And if everyone in this room could pick like one of the lanes I mentioned or 2 or 3 and just commit, I think like it will make a world of difference. If you are a lawyer, join our lawyer referral service because we need to connect members of our community with you. Volunteer to give pro bono services and keep in touch with us. We really want to know what you're seeing on the ground. So those are my ideas. Thank you so much for being here. I will kick it back to Ricardo for some closing thoughts.
Before you close, Ricardo, could I just say a quick comment in response to some of the questions we've gotten and then follow up to something? Yeah, that's Sarah.
Of course.
So, you know, people understandably are asking questions like, can I stay in a Facebook group? You know, how will the data about me that has been shared in some of the digital technology that has, you know, really created strength and community for people be used? And I want to acknowledge those fears and concerns that people have. Again, kind of resonating with my earlier themes, I would be thoughtful about your decision and think about questions like, to what degree are you already out as transgender? If you're seeking to protect confidential information of about yourself or connect with groups, there are alternatives to Facebook that may be less publicly accessible. I mean, people should presume that those kinds of communications could be public, even just from the community group of which you're a part online. So to me, it's not so much about like, how is that going to be used in nefarious ways by an incoming administration, as much as be thoughtful and careful about digital technology, about the kinds of personal information that you share in ways that could become public. But also it is really important. I will just say, I mean, there's generations of transgender people and gay and lesbian, bisexual people who can share the challenges of creating and forging community when there's risks to personal safety and to your livelihood and having information about you shared with the community. And so I think it's really important to think about what do you need in terms of the strength in creating community, and at the same time be smart in terms of digital safety and sharing of personal information in those kinds of contexts. And I also wanted to answer a question that people have had about X markers, because there's been growing access for non-binary people to have X markers on ID documents. And I think it's important to ask yourself, why do you want it and why do you need it? And then evaluate the decision about whether to get an X marker based on those answers. I do want to say for everybody, ID documents don't make you who you are, which doesn't mean that people shouldn't have identity documents that reflect who they are. But I think these are times where we should all be thoughtful and careful about the steps and the decisions that we make about ID documents. And that's certainly true for non-binary people as we continue to have need to develop stronger understanding and greater sense of who people are and respond to the kinds of misinformation and really kind of stereotypes that don't reflect the reality of who people are in response to an attempt to remove that, to focus on ideology and take the focus and attention away from individuals. And Ricardo, I'll throw it back to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Sarah, Polly, Mary, everyone behind the scenes who's running technology for us so that we don't look foolish for those who are not Zoom experts. I know many of you and many people you know and love are looking for ways to support GLAAD Law in this fight. And we prepared a resource that you can use and share with your friends and family. Erin may have already shared it. If it has not been shared, I'm sure it's coming. We're obviously going to need resources and we're going to need volunteers and champions of this work during the fight ahead. So as Sarah mentioned earlier today, if you are an attorney, please feel free to get in touch with us so that we can plug you in as needed. If we didn't get to your specific question tonight, know that we will follow up via email with general information. And of course, you can contact GLAAD Law Answers with questions about your specific situation, and we can make a referral to the appropriate attorney or the appropriate resource that gets you hopefully closer to an answer. I haven't met a lot of you, and you may have tuned in from various parts across the country, but I feel very lucky that I have always had this clarity of purpose. And since I can remember, I've had this profound sense of duty to make the world a better place, and that doesn't stop because of one election. I may temporarily feel anger, the same anger and betrayal and frustration that you may be feeling either today or coming down from, and I will internalize it and process defeat, but my spirit, righteous indignation and love for community and country will always pick me back up. So thank you to everyone who is here, part of my community. That will never change. I commit to fighting now and forever. This is my life purpose. The vehicle and the place and the tactics, the strategy even may evolve, but my commitment to contributing and uplifting marginalized communities and working within and externally of traditional power structures, that will never change, nor my ability to do this with a tender heart. I always tell people that my softness is my superpower, and there are so many people like me who are just feeling very gentle in this moment, and I'm holding you softly and in so much light. In this work, I've learned that loving actions, big or small, fuel this resistance and can help illuminate us in the darkest of times. So stay soft while we take time to grieve and regroup. I can't help but feel gratitude for all of the people who fight every single day, the poll workers, the door knockers, the canvassers, the pro-LGBTQ candidates who run for office, the courageous queer people living authentically and defiantly out loud. We need more of that. The activists, the parents who unconditionally love their children, those who are on a journey of understanding, allies doing the work to be better, folks willing to engage in difficult conversations, and those who, despite all of this, are finding a way to push beyond fear. I want you to know that it's okay to pause and acknowledge the grief that is associated with loss, and to care for your body and spirit. Listen to your body and give it what it needs in this moment, whether it's rest, laughter, joy, sweets, community, movement, stillness, or creative expression. Be kind to yourself, be kind to those around you. And when you're able to celebrate the courage that it has taken for us to get here, remember the champions who got us this far, and lean on each other for comfort and support. We're here waiting for you when you're ready. To fight like hell for a future we all deserve. We have your back. I have your back. I appreciate y'all for tuning in. Thank you very much. And and we will follow up with more information soon. Many thanks.